Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. I'm really excited about today's guest. She's a comedian and entrepreneur, and she's the founder and CEO of Plauzzable. And I really love her story of leveraging her unique skill set and talent to create value for her audience, create a living, control her time, income, her emotional freedom, financial freedom, all of that. And I'm happy to welcome Leanne to the show. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I know we had connected through Podmatch and kind of I like to set the stage, your early experiences kind of briefly and how that set you to where you are now. And we're going to dive right into the conversation.
Awesome. Do you want me to tell you a little bit about how I got here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Tell us your backstory.
I've had a interesting journey to entrepreneurship. I never set out to do that. So I had gone to school for business and graduated and got my bachelor's in business, but I ended up going to UNLV. What a place to be, Las Vegas, when you're in your
Oh,
20s, right?
oh.
And and I ended up getting a bookkeeping job. And then a year later, I went to work for a Fortune 500. And I ended up being there for nearly 13 years. And
Wow.
during that time, I did a lot of public speaking and talking to people. And I ended up taking a comedy writing class in 2001. And I loved it. And then a coworker was like, you should really take like an improv class or something like that. And I was like, what? Turns out the Second City had a training center in Las Vegas. And I was familiar with Second City because I'm originally from Illinois. And so I signed up for a class, loved it, fell in love with the whole improv comedy thing. I'm like, I'm going to take all of the classes, here, take all my money. I took all the classes 2 and 3 times and loved it. And I traveled to New York periodically to take classes. I traveled to LA to take classes on my weekends and vacation time. And my friends in the theater that I met in New York, they're like, are you ever going to move to New York? And I'm like, oh, I have a job I love. I have this home and I have a lot going on. So maybe not, but that would be my dream if I didn't have all this other good stuff. Well, lo and behold, I was laid off after 13 years of being with this amazing company.
Mm.
And I received a phone call from a friend who said, hey, I'm moving to New York this summer and I need a roommate. I found a place to sublet it. Are you interested? And I said, well, I'll think about it. He says, you have 1 hour. I said, oh, okay. So I went for a walk. I came back. I'm like, I couldn't think of a reason why I shouldn't. So I said, I'm in. And a month later, I packed up 2 suitcases and moved to New York. And ended up staying there and immersed myself into the whole world of comedy and acting for about 9 years.
Mm.
And it was amazing. I did some theater, I did some commercials, I did lots of comedy, I did improv, I ran an open mic. I did all these things unrelated to what I went to school for, right? and also all the things my parents were like, what are you doing? So yeah. And then I ended up moving to LA and I found myself spending more time in traffic than I did on the stage. And that's where I started thinking, like, how can I solve this problem? And how, as a comedian, can I actually really start making money? Because contrary to popular belief, comedians usually don't get paid. And when we do, we don't get paid a lot. So I was like, how do I fix all that? And I started doing things online. And this was actually in August of 2019 BC, before COVID. And some comedians were like, this is amazing. Why aren't you charging us for this and the open mics and stuff that you're doing? And then COVID happened and everybody started using all the existing technologies and, video conferencing and stuff to do things. I mean, that's how we all stayed in touch, as you know. And although those technologies are great and got us through the pandemic, they're really targeted more for general purpose use or business. And I was like, if we could take some of these ideas, but really hone them in and tweak them and make them for performers, why aren't we doing that? And
Mm.
so I created Plauzzable. The idea was planted, the seed, and I ended up going back to school and getting my master's in innovation and entrepreneurship at University of California, Irvine, and got involved in incubators and accelerator programs so that I actually could scale it and build a team and be around people in that whole entrepreneurial ecosystem to make it successful.
A lot of people think Vegas is a party city, which I mean, a lot of people go there, but it's actually a
Yeah.
great city for artists and entrepreneurs, you want to start a restaurant, or chefs, acrobat, dancers,
Yeah.
comedians, it's a vibrant city of entrepreneurship. So most people don't know that, but I love that city. Um,
Yeah.
you made a funny comment. You're like, you're doing everything except the thing you went to school for, which kind of questions the value of school these days. But
I could talk for at length at that. Yeah. I have lots of questions about the education. But it's funny because I went back to school for my master's at the age of 50.
yeah,
And I was like, I'd always thought to myself, maybe when I'm older, I would want to go back to school. And then I got to this age and I'm like, I was thinking about this and I'm like, wow, do I really need it?
yeah,
I will tell you this. I am so glad I did it. I don't know the value of it as an entrepreneur, but I mean, in the sense of like, is it getting me a job? I don't know. I would hire me because, I
yeah,
think I'm pretty cool. But what I really value about it is the network and the people that we meet
yeah,
because of it. I think there's a value on that. But I will say this, I am a much better student at the age of 50 than I was at the age of 20 something or at the end of my teenage years. And the other thing that I found that I loved about it is I could really put things in context, when you do case studies and things like that. It's just like, oh, Blockbuster, I lived through that. I still have a membership card here somewhere, when you do all these things. But to be able to put things in context and actually have experience, because of course, when I was in New York, I held other jobs. I managed a theater. I did. I worked as a director of marketing at another company and stuff like that. And it all ties in eventually to owning your own business. So, like I say, any education, any job experience, really, I don't discount because at the end of the day, I'm wearing all the hats as an entrepreneur as I start this business. So I need to know some bookkeeping. I need to know some marketing. I need to know all of that. Yeah.
yeah. I really love the success stories of people that either public speakers or comedians that kind of made it, and they were doing it on the side, just kind of learning their routines and kind of I guess your skits, or your rehearsing your material, like testing it out. So yeah, one thing I have a question is about your creative process, because as a comedian, you're coming up with like you're trying to incorporate like humor into everyday things, and kind of what is your creative process? How do you put things together? How do you test it out? If it fails, how do you bounce back from that? I'm just curious.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Such a good question, right? And I kind of think of it. I think there's a lot of similarities between comedy and entrepreneurship. I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of failures in both that we have to recover from that make us really resilient. And with comedy, for me, it's an expectation. I mean, not every joke I think of is going to land. In fact, most don't. I like to write a joke. And this is, I could go on for days about this, but okay. So my writing process, let's break it down. My writing process, I find that I can, but it's really challenging to just sit down and be like, I'm going to write jokes, unless I have it in a habit. Like when I was writing my one woman show, I had a daily writing habit where I'd write for 4 hours a day.
Wow.
In the morning, I'd block out these chunks of time, and that like I would go to a coffee shop down the street in New York and I would sit there for hours. I don't know if they appreciated that, but that's what I did. And I did that for like a year, and I did it all the time. And in writing a joke, I just have to like stream of conscious, let things come out. And, sometimes we think we live an experience, like when we think our friends are funny and they tell a story of something happened, they're like, they're so funny. But if I put them on stage, they're probably not that funny because it's a different, I'm paying $25 and 2-drink minimum. Do I think you're funny as you would be in my living room if I knew you? Probably not. Because sometimes there's storytelling and sometimes there's joke telling, and there's a difference. And so like when I start or when I'm writing a show, I might write the truth of like a situation that happened, but then I have to go back and I have to edit it over and over and over. And I have to, kill my darlings, things that I think are great or something, but have no place in the joke or make no sense, or maybe doesn't make sense right now. And I have to set them aside. So I have to get really economical with my words, because if I take too long to get there, I've lost the audience. People are getting up to go get a drink or go to the bathroom or check their phone. I have to have a laugh every so many seconds in a set or I lose people. And so there's a lot of rewriting, there's a lot of editing. And then often when I write, for me, I don't write in the way I speak. Like if you ever translate, a conversation with somebody, on, one of those translation services after a podcast, you're like, what kind of word salad is coming out of our mouths? Yet it seems to flow so easily when we talk in conversation. But to read it is garbage, because we don't speak like we read and we don't read like we speak. So when I write jokes, I then have to do a lot of open mic work and go to open mics and say those jokes aloud and hear how they sound. Because right off the paper, if I read a joke, it's probably not very good. I have to, there's nuances, there's cadence and timing and enunciation and emphasis and all these different things that go into play of delivering the joke. And so I may have written a joke that's workable, but I have to tweak it and play with it, and body language and facial expression, all that play into it. And it's just a constant, evolution. So it's kind of like a new business for me, like in building Plauzzable. I have a plan and then I have a budget and then I have to see like how those things match up. And then I also have my users. So what in my mind is brilliant or a great idea, my users are like, what? I don't even know what you're doing right now. How do I use this? And then I have to go back and, it's user experience, and a joke is similar to UX. Like, is my audience getting it? Do they understand it? Are they laughing at the right place? Or are they just like, off, in another, missing the point entirely? It's very similar to that. So it's definitely a process. Comedians who get really good is because they're writing a lot and they're getting into their open mics and practicing. I think any art form, even doing my one woman show and writing that, it wasn't all stand up or anything. It was me playing characters. And, the first time I put my show up, it was a 25-minute to 30-minute show. And that night, my director and I sat there and we're like, that didn't work. Rewrite. Next week, show goes up again a couple more times, get more feedback from the audience, tweak this, throw this out, put this in. And then a year later, my show is now 55 minutes, and it's more polished and where I want it to be. So I don't know, it's never necessarily perfect. It's ongoing. It's a whole feedback cycle based on different people. And that was my very long answer.
No, actually, I love it because I love talking to creatives such as yourself, because you actually get a lot of insight from the creative process. Because I was listening to this podcast the other day about Steve Martin, and when he was first starting out, he was just horrible, but he was doing what you were doing, just kind of refining and just kind of practicing it, seeing what the response was. And you alluded to entrepreneurship, which is really interesting because before the internet, startups, it was really hard. You had to like raise venture capital or angel investing. And, basically in startup entrepreneurship, it's you have to increase your execution rate or your iteration rate. So you basically each execution, you have to do it faster and faster. And same thing with public speaking. Before, like, you had to like fly and you had to go here and there, drive in your car and practice. But now with after COVID or BC or after COVID, now you can get on Zoom, you can get on lives, you can practice the whole day, and that way your material gets better and better. I'm wondering if there's an equivalent to that in comedy, because you mentioned like open mics, but I'm just wondering if there's like you could reiterate your creative process much faster, if you have any insights into that.
You mean online?
Yeah, because go ahead.
Okay, so my company Plauzzable is exactly that. So it's a way to kind of level the playing field and making it more accessible to people and more easier for comedians to get their stage time. So to your point, I don't by any means intend to replace in person, because there's a magic to in person. I think there's just a humanity to in person that can't be replicated. And I don't want to do that. But there is a bridge, like what about the in-betweens? What about people who don't have the luxury like I did of being laid off and then not having family or obligation that I can just take 2 suitcases and move to New York City or LA, right? Not everybody can do that. So there's what I did is I created Plauzzable, which basically, if you think about like right now, you and I are talking on like a Zoom, right? But so you're familiar with this. On Plauzzable, we use all of our own technology that we customized for entertainment purposes. So when you log into Plauzzable as a comedian, you get the scheduling tools, the calendar, you get to put in your show descriptions or your open mic or whatever it is, and you get to post it within Plauzzable on our like marketplace for think about it like Etsy. Etsy has sellers and people shopping. On Plauzzable, you have comedians and you have comedy fans. So as a comedy fan, you could go through and look through all the show listings. If you register for a show on Plauzzable, all the shows are on Plauzzable. So they're in real time. They're not pre-recorded because that would be YouTube, but they're in real time and live. And like Zoom, we can see and hear each other right now in real time. You can see and hear the comedians and the other audience members. So everybody can see and hear each other in the same place. But what's important about this is that as comedians, I need to know if you're laughing right now. Like I can't do audio delays. I can't, wait until you like it on social. Like that just is like, what? Did you really watch it? Or were you, so like hearing you laugh right now is valuable to me as a comedian. Like that's huge. That's what I need to know. Is my joke working? And to see you. So even if you have your audio off, I can see the visual response, right? And also not everybody laughs out loud. So, news alert, so it's important to have those key factors play into performing. So even though I'm not in person in a club, I'm here, in my home venue, if you will, and I can perform. This is my stage. Like if I were doing any on-camera work for TV or anything, I just change what my stage is and I can still perform and have a live audience. And at the end of the show, as everybody logs out and the show ends, they are prompted to rate and review each performer in the show. So instead of, if you go to a local club, you go on Yelp, but you're rating and reviewing the club, because comedians are just traveling through town. But here you're rating and giving feedback to the actual performer, and then they get their star ratings and they move up the charts on the, comedian directory, and you can sort by, newest that just signed up to the first person that signed up, their popularity, who's trending. You can sort by what kind of comedy people do. Do they, maybe nobody wants to hear about politics these days as we go into an election year. I just want to hear about relationships. You can go through and see which comedians just talk, about those things, and kind of sort through and filter that way to your personal preferences. So there's a way now that the control is basically, kind of going back to where we started with your initial question. My platform gives the control to the comedians rather than to the venues. Because if I want to go do it at a venue, when I ran a mic in New York for 7.5 years, I would have to go find the venue, find out what night works for them, make that, do that. But on Plauzzable, any comedian can go on here and be like, I'm going to do a mic tonight. I'm going to do a mic tomorrow. I'm going to do every Sunday. I'm going to do this. And they do it. They can either do it for free. They can set their own ticket prices. They make the majority of the money off their ticket revenue, which like in a club, they usually don't do a split at the door unless you're a very well-known name, but you get a flat fee, or if you're a guest spot or no TV credits or something, you're basically, oftentimes you have to barter for that and go out and bring paying customers in. And for every paying customer, you get 1 minute of stage time, or you could maybe get some fries and a burger or something afterward. So this kind of puts the control that no matter you don't have to have a minimum number of followers. Like on YouTube, you have to have followers before you can get ad revenue. You can sell one ticket and you're making the majority of the money.
Yeah. And it sounds like what you're doing is you're scaling creative talent and you're creating a marketplace for that. Much like an Airbnb or Uber, except you're just is comedic talent. Sounds like, and then you're making it democratized. So it's like, yeah, I don't have to know the club owner. I can just go to Ontario and I can start rehearsing and get better and better. And it kind of reminds me of the online poker, because like you would have to go to Vegas or these places, Atlantic City to, get experience. But with online poker, you just reiterate very quickly. And then that way your level of skill, dramatically increased.
Yeah.
Really interesting. And then one thing that is interesting is so you talked about technology, and one thing that's kind of on the horizon, I'm not sure if it's gonna touch comedy yet, but there's artificial intelligence, there's the metaverse, there's Web3. How do you envision future of live comedy shows in person or online, and virtual live entertainment? Where do you see the future in this question?
Yeah. So I love this question. I think there are a lot of possibilities, and I see that I don't think in person is ever going away, because, it's just a human connection. I do think that there are, and especially since COVID, and I appreciate COVID for the fact that people who may not otherwise got tech skills online have them, and now have more of a comfort level and familiarity with new technology, more willingness to try new technology. So I do see that happening. We already see changes in the streaming services and how they're going about releasing movies, and whoever thought a movie theater wouldn't be open, right? Like that's a huge change. And I think we're going to see more people. There's a convenience to being online. And I also, when it comes to the metaverse, I'm fascinated by the metaverse. I have my Oculus. I go in there, I check things out. It's funny because everybody in there is walking around with their head tilted, looking at their wrist, because nobody knows what they're doing. But I think it's a possibility for sure, because it already exists. People are doing it. But as we've seen, VR has been around for a very long time. It's had a very slow growth trajectory as people have worked through it. I think now what my feeling is it's there's some barriers. There's some economic barriers because it's expensive to buy the equipment, and not everybody can do that. And I think there's also some it's high friction right now. So when I watch users online, as much as people have gotten familiar with stuff over COVID, it's amazing, like how many people don't know what a browser is, or, I'm serious, or like what my password, and it's typos, and we still have a ways to go. And so I think the things that are lower friction are going to move along much quicker. And even people who are tech savvy, and even younger generations who grew up with tech, I find like they have less, and this is a generalization, so forgive me for that, but I see that my experience has been less patience and willingness to problem solve, but higher expectations of like, this should just happen. And then you have people like a little bit older, like I didn't always have tech. I didn't have my first cell phone till I was 30, and I had to get up and change the TV channel. But there's a different level of problem solving willingness in order to figure things out, where some people are like, it should just be one click, I get it. I'm with you, but that's not always how it works. Yeah.
That's Gen Z. Gen Zs are like, it should just be like one swipe, and
that's like the goal.
So kind of ending it out, COVID-19 forced a shift. You talked about tech. There's always like new tech is always like a learning curve. I'm always playing around, experimenting, and then kind of learning it, and then thinking like, how do I apply it? Like, can I do this to a video or a podcast? Or so how's this shift influence the way you approach your craft? And what lasting changes do you anticipate? And kind of talk about how people can follow you, check out Plauzzable, check out your work, etc.
Yeah. How has it changed my path? I never leave my desk. Like my body is now permanently shaped like an IKEA chair. That's how it's changed my life. Or like, well, I've done a couple like in-person public speaking things, but I typically do all of my stuff online right now, but that's because my primary focus is Plauzzable. And I also see other people really integrating it more and more because they realize there's a convenience to it and there's a value to it. There's no geographic barriers. So as a performer, I'm able to reach people around the globe. For instance, just last night we had a wide variety of people across the country and internationally, but we did a comedy contest and we had someone from Japan, we had someone from Hawaii, we had someone from California, New York, New Jersey, Dallas, like you name it, people were all over. That's something that I see people really, really seeing the value in. With that, people can find me obviously on Plauzzable, and that's Plauzzable, because someone bought all the domains. Also, I like Z's. So yeah, Plauzzable. But we're at Plauzzable on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and follow us there. We have hundreds of comedians on the platform now, and even more fans. So lots of stuff to see.
Yeah, I love that, and what a fantastic conversation around technology, creative process. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. All of Leanne's resources will be in the links and show notes. Be sure to check out her socials, give her a follow, check out Plauzzable as well. And with that, thanks so much for coming onto the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed talking with you. And of course, it's always a pleasure talking about comedy. Thank you.